William Madison McDonald was born a little more than a year after the Civil War near Terrell, Texas. His parents gave him this name after William Shakespeare and James Madison. McDonald was a great student growing up, eventually working for lawyer and rancher Captain Z.T. Adams. Adams started teaching him about business, law. After attending and graduating from Roger Williams University in Nashville, Tennessee, a historically black college, McDonald returned to Texas to start his diverse career. In the late 1800s, McDonald became principal of a segregated black high school in Forney, speaking up for the public school systems and prioritizing education for students. Soon after, he became involved in politics, specifically the Republican Party. He helped organize the party in Kaufman County, and in 1892 was elected to the Republican Party of Texas State Executive Committee. For decades, McDonald had a strong voice in state politics, becoming the leader of the South Republicans' biracial Black and Tan faction, which opposed the party's Lily White movement. McDonald and the Black and Tan faction worked to encourage black people within the party to go out and vote. At the 1896 Republican National Convention, it is believed that a Dallas Morning News reporter gave McDonald the now well-known nickname, Gooseneck Bill. McDonald moved to Fort Worth in 1906, where he built and became manager of the Fraternal Bank and Trust Company. It was also one of the rare banks from its time that survived the Great Depression. McDonald's bank helped black entrepreneurs by lending them money when the white banks would not. Coincidentally, many of these same white banks were saved during the Great Depression because of loans McDonald's bank provided them. McDonald also got into the hotel business, becoming the owner of Fort Worth's first black-owned hotel, The Gym. Due to his savvy and inclusive business work, it is believed McDonald is the first black millionaire in all of Texas. McDonald died on July 5, 1950, in Fort Worth. McDonald's presence remains here in North Texas. There's the William M. McDonald YMCA in southeast Fort Worth. You can also find this mural paying tribute to McDonald on the south side of the Fort Worth Central Station. In 2002, the Texas Historical Commission and the city of Forney erected this historical marker in his honor, saying in part, "Throughout his life, McDonald was a leader in the struggle for social justice, advocating persistence and civic and moral responsibility as the steps to equality."
And you can see where that legacy still influences our lives today, right here in North Texas.